I don't think there's a lot of doubt that the Ottawa Senators have improved. The real question is how much? Do they contend for a playoff spot this coming year? Well, see, it really depends on your perspective on this team and how well they've done. Now, for this video, I'm wearing the in between, not the jersey with the design that they currently had before they switched back to this, and definitely not the original. So the Scooby-Doo eyes are on for today. But this was their best secondary logo. Absolutely. So when you look at realistically what their roster is going to look like this season, Stützle is likely going to be the one rookie who is a lock for a job. So we'll see how this goes for him. Yeah, so Jake Sanderson's playing for the University of North Dakota this year when they get their season started. And so Stützle is the one guy who will get that look. Now, their forward group, again, I think is better. Tkachuk, White, and Dadonov is likely your first line or something along those lines. Anisimov, Stützle, and Connor Brown likely round out the top six. I don't see them as being a playoff team, but I do see them as being better than they've been for the last couple of years. And once we get into officially doing previews for next season, which I think is about a month away, I'm going to say middle of November, I'll be able to start really doing previews for next season. We'll have an idea of when it's going to happen, what it'll look like, whether it's a shortened season, whether it's a season that only features teams playing certain other teams and not everybody playing everybody, what happens. But this is just an overlook as it stands. And keep in mind, they still have a lot of cap space. They can still add players to this list. Now, on the third line, you'd have Paul or Balcers. I like Rudolph Balcers a lot. I think that there's a lot of potential there for offense. Tierney, Logan Brown. Logan Brown, of course, wasn't happy with being demoted to the AHL when he was last year. And so he'll be looking, I would think, not just to make this team, but potentially make a push for a third line center spot. Chris Tierney, to me, if I'm Ottawa, I might listen to offers for Tierney's services right now. I might. Only because you got White, you got Stützle, you got Logan Brown, and then here's Josh Norris, who I haven't read because he doesn't project as being in the lineup, but he could be a wild card. Same as Formenton is here on the left side for the team. And then Austin Watson I have on that third line. He was just added from Nashville. And Batherson. Batherson, another one who projects to be higher in the lineup than fourth line, obviously. So there's a lot of players here. And I've left some guys off because I'm going, okay, what's the most likely in terms of who makes this team and who doesn't? And I'm just leaving it at those guys. So from the forward group, can you make the playoffs with that forward group? I'm going to say not yet. So we're still likely, I would say, a year away from seeing an Ottawa roster that could push into a playoff spot. Now, if they did the unlikely and added Hoffman, if Hoffman said, yeah, I'll come back, and they go, yep, we'll bring you back on a one-year contract, that would be another top six forward that can score goals, and then we might be having a different conversation. And again, Ottawa might be in a position right now where Pierre Dorian can say, okay, we've got probably too many forwards here. We might be able to move one out for another future asset. We might be able to move one out to get help somewhere else. This could be a very interesting team to watch for trades, as well as to see whether or not they trade the rest of, well, not the rest of their cap space, but some more of their cap space, and help other teams out in exchange for draft picks coming back. Now, the blue line is really all over the place. So you've got Shabbat, Zaitsev, Riley, and Goodbranson. Is that going to be the top four? I don't know, because you've got Brandstrom, who right now would likely be on the outside, but Brandstrom had a good year in the AHL, and he is envisioned as the future on the blue line. So because Brandstrom's envisioned as a top four, does that bump Goodbranson down to third pairing? Brandstrom goes to second pairing, and then what happens to Josh Brown? They just brought him in. They envision him as being a big part of their blue line. You've got Wolanin as well, who should be healthy after missing last season. But then there's Maxime Lajoie. I like Lajoie. I could see him being a trade piece as well if they decide to move somebody. Yarosh, Thompson, Zub are all right side. They didn't sign Artem Zub for no reason. So there are a lot of guys and not very many jobs to be had on this blue line. And it might be the most fascinating part of the Ottawa Senators is that blue line. You could see Brandstrom jumping in, and then, looking at this, you ask yourself, I ask myself anyways, might they move Zaitsev? Because if Brandstrom, let's just say Brandstrom has a really good camp and he belongs on the defense, and you decide you're going to have him on one pairing and Chabot on the other. That way you've got an offensive defenseman on both. Because Brandstrom is supposed to be an offensive force, the NHL level, and a really good defenseman. And he's supposed to make Vegas regret trading him. He hasn't thus far. So Brandstrom, you would think, would go on one pairing, Chabot on the other, considering they're left and right defensemen. You could put them together. Goodbranson and Brown need to play, so then that ends up with Zaitsev potentially being the odd man out. Or do you play 7 defensemen? Do you go 11 forwards and 7 defensemen? If you go 11 forwards, do you drop Balcers out? Does that mean Fermenton and Norris don't have a chance to really make the team and play? Because you've got guys that you're paying that are going to play. It gets really interesting. It is surprising to see with Ottawa when we talk about the Senators and the shape they've been in. They do have a lot of players they could potentially find takers for if they decided to make some moves to make themselves better in the short term. The one question I have is this. Chabot is a star on the blue line. No doubt in my mind. All-star and the most valuable player to this team and likely will be for a long time. I think he's going to be excellent on their blue line for many, many years to come. But I don't look at this blue line and say, yeah, that's a blue line that can compete with Tampa, with Toronto, with Boston. Yes, I said Toronto. And it's just I don't see a defense here that has enough top 4 defensemen that make them better than, say, another team in the East. Enough teams in the East, especially, to make the playoffs. Detroit has even improved their blue line over the offseason to the point where I don't know that Detroit necessarily has the worst defense in the league either. And people are going to say, wow, adding Stahl and Stetcher? No, it's more along the lines of if Chalowski continues his development, Roenick continues his development, and if you see Moritz Seider come in, Detroit could low-key have one of the better defense cores, especially comparatively speaking with where we would rank them if we were ranking defense cores right now. I would probably right now rank Detroit 31st, and they could prove me to be a fool within a month into the season. But Ottawa low-key has a lot of defensemen, a lot of likely NHL-level defensemen. I just don't know how much of them are going to be game breakers. Brandstrom should be. Thompson could develop into that. They have others that aren't yet signed, like Bernard Docker and others, like I said, Sanderson, who's going to university. So eventually they could have one of the better defense cores in the NHL. Not for this season, though. So maybe Zub ends up coming in and stealing a job, and you end up moving somebody else out. But it is interesting that they bring in Brown and they bring in Goodbranson when they already likely had a pretty decent defense, if inexperienced and if lacking that grit that you need in your top 6. I'm still surprised this team moved on from Borowiecki, especially when you look at what Borokop got from Nashville. That's a very doable contract for Ottawa. I'm really surprised that Borowiecki isn't still a member of the Senators. It doesn't feel right to me. It's seeing Borowiecki in another jersey is just not going to feel right, considering throughout this rebuild he was kind of the face of it, and he was the one that embraced it and said, yep, this could work. And he did that interview with Melnick, which felt just so awkward, and just to think that then when his contract was up, he left town too. It's so weird. And then in net, of course, this is where they are gambling. They are gambling that Matt Murray gets back to being the Matt Murray that won back-to-back cups with Pittsburgh. And now it's been enough time that the debate becomes, yeah, but was Murray really a big part of those cup wins? I will answer with, yes, of course he was, yes. But there are people who will say, no, that was because he was on Pittsburgh, and then he gets exposed here, and he's inconsistent. I will agree with inconsistent. It felt like every year with Pittsburgh, I was making a video on Matt Murray and how I still believed he was a good goaltender, and then a month later, his stats would back that up. But then a month after that, his stats might take another dive. So Murray has struggled with inconsistency, and now he's the de facto starter. I don't think there's any debate about that. You got Hogberg as likely the backup. But you've also got Philip Gustafsson. Now, Gustafsson's AHL numbers last year, uninspiring. However, his numbers thus far in Europe have been very good. So Gustafsson may push himself into that conversation for the backup role. I think Hogberg was decent in the games he played last year. But the goaltending for Ottawa is okay. I will say this, with the amount of cap space they still have, and they've still got, a couple of guys to get signed and all of that wonderful stuff. But in general, this is a team that I think is in good shape for being competitive, I'll say, next year. Like I said, there's a lot of draft picks and prospects that likely will come into the equation next season, not necessarily this one, whenever this one gets started. But they are fascinating to watch. And Ottawa's finally become fascinating to watch, not because of being a tire fire and not because of what did the boss say today, but because they legit have so many good young prospects coming up, and they've made some interesting discussions and decisions when it comes to who they've brought in, whether it's Gustafsson or Brown. And so you can kind of see that there's a vision here going forward. And now that you've got an owner coming out and saying, I expect to win a Stanley Cup 4 years from now, that's the kind of soundbite that we look for, and we say, all right, is there a Stanley Cup in this franchise 4 years from now? And I get the question a lot of, can you see X franchise winning a Stanley Cup in 5 years? And I always answer with, anything's possible in 5 years. Anything is legit possible 5 years down the road. Because very often you will see a team win a Stanley Cup that if you had told that franchise's fans, even as recently as a year beforehand, by the way, you guys are winning the Stanley Cup next year, their fans would have said, no, we're not. I could use St. Louis as a good example. I could use Tampa as an example after they bowed out in 4 straight against Columbus. If I'd said, this is exactly what Tampa needs, now they're going to win the Stanley Cup next year, people would have said, are you crazy? So that's kind of, and if I had said the Vegas was going to go to the Stanley Cup final their first year, people would have said I deserve to be committed. They would have been right, honestly. Before that season started, if I'd said that, I probably would have deserved to be committed. So there is no reason that Ottawa can't turn things around, but I do think there are some weaknesses going on here. White needs to live up to that contract, and maybe upgrading the wings where you've got Anisimov and Brown. It might be better to have them on the third line than the second line when everything gets settled out. But we'll see. Because while Stützle's, showing up as a center on projected charts, he could very well start his career as a winger. Tierney would then be the center. Brown moves up, and then maybe that gives Norris a spot in the lineup. The thing then is, does Balcers drop out? Probably. Paul would then be on the fourth line. Batherson, Watson, Brown. It might work out better that way, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens. So let me know what you guys think in the comments section below regarding the Senators. How far off are they? What kind of season are they going to put together? This past season, they were better than they were the year before. Can they continue that upward trajectory? And what do you expect from the super rookie in Stützle, or do you expect him to maybe struggle initially when he reaches the NHL, because we've seen Hughes and Kakko most recently struggle to put up points their first year in the NHL, and maybe it takes a little bit longer for him as well. Let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. It means a ton during this point in time, and 2020 being as 2020 as it is. I will talk to you guys again soon.